Everyday experiences are signposts on our journey through life. They point to different directions and then leave the choice of which one to take entirely up to us. One day, I opened my garage door and noticed it was emptier than usual, and for a good reason too. I had been robbed. My bicycles and those of my daughters were gone, and there was no evidence of forced entry. And the floor was swept clean, so my list of suspects was very narrow. It was either the plumbers who had been around or perhaps an inside job. Now, there were no witnesses, and bicycles weren't the police's priority. So I was angry, frustrated, and sad. And for weeks, I dreamt up some gruesome inventions to deal with bike thieves in the future. And one of them was a mobile app that could detect if there was a big, juicy rider on the move, then activate a surprise through the seat. So you imagine something like this. Hello, Kamini.
Hello, Ian. How can I help you?
Activate Sneyman.
Now? Just now? Or now?
Make it snappy. There's a thug in Cape Town riding on my bike.
Now why you want to activate Snyman now? Okay, no need to shout, dial 922 hash to activate. Snyman 2.0 activated.
My brat. Tell it like it is. The peoples, they must know. They must know. Then one afternoon, I drove past a young cyclist. Perhaps maybe 9 or 10 years old. He was alone and trying very hard to do a wheelie. Now, a wheelie is a bike trick where you lift up the front wheel and ride along with only the rear wheel on the ground. And what was fascinating was how focused and determined the young man looked, and the fact that he was teaching himself. So I got home and I immersed myself in the subject of one-wheel cycling and slowly drifted from the bicycle to the unicycle, and my mind was all over the place, through applied mathematics, physics, psychology, sports, and even reaching back as far as my childhood memories of the 1960s, when I sat ringside with a huge packet of popcorn under my arm, completely mesmerized by the unicyclists of the Great Circus of China. Those ladies were beautiful. And I don't remember to this day what happened to my bag of popcorn. Anyway, back to my story. My wife happened to be out of town, so I could think very clearly, and boom, I ordered a unicycle. I can already picture a few smiles and giggles. For many, the first image that comes to mind is either a clown or an acrobat, and pictures of the inevitable tumble and crash, preferably one that happens backwards. And when we meet a unicyclist who isn't an entertainer, some of us admire them, and others label them eccentric, reckless, and dangerous. Now, those of you with young children, just picture yourselves at home today, and your dear little one dashes into the room with a huge smile and announces, "Mommy, Daddy, I know what I want for Christmas this year, a unicycle." Now, some of you will probably be reeling just from the very thought of it. And ladies, what if it's your 60-something-year-old husband who out of the blue orders one for himself? You probably start wondering what's gotten into his head and who else might have influenced his life. Gentlemen, pay close attention, because after nearly 40 years with the same lovely lady, I can speak with some authority on the subject. If your better half didn't initiate a crazy idea, then it's never about what caused the change. It's always about who. So I was in big trouble because this all started in her absence. Now, as we conceptualize the attributes of a typical unicyclist, what usually comes to mind is a crazy, good-looking, young, thin, athletic, affluent person full of fun and adventure. And even though the oldest recorded cyclist was 92 years old at the time, and not at all crazy, we middle-aged old-timers will probably get the label of middle-age crisis, if not simply insanity. Now, the truth is that unicycling is just as diverse as biking, and you can do a lot of things in addition to clowning around. And the scope varies from rides in the gymnasium to trips around the neighborhood to wild and wonderful outdoor adventures. And some of the outdoor things that people do are intense and rival mountain biking. There are also games like hockey, basketball, volleyball. So from this point on, every time you see someone doing something on a bicycle, just know that a unicyclist can do it and more. Now, the most popular forms of unicycling are really for recreation and transport. And the standard type is where everybody gets started. The early phase is critical, and this is where prospective unicyclists either continue or give up. But after getting into it and learning how to ride, the learning never stops. Because once you can ride 10 meters, you are officially classified as a unicyclist, and all the doomsday spectators in your life will vanish, either because they're busy or because they're envious, or they've just simply moved on to the next topic. Most unicyclists, except for Japan and South Korea, are self-taught. It's just the way things are. You're probably not going to find a unicycle coach or a friend around every corner, but that's not to say that there are none. Now, to get going, there's plenty of good stuff that you can find over the internet, especially from Google searches and YouTube, and there are some very good books from Amazon. Not everybody has to like unicycling, but when the idea pops up in your head and you're intrigued by it, you're immediately faced with your biggest challenger, none other than yourself. Getting past the belief that you can't do it and that it's dangerous is just the first hurdle. And you've got to toy with the idea. You've got to motivate and persuade yourself and psych yourself to a point where you have enough courage to begin. After which, you must be determined, focused, and persevere against all odds. And that's how it is with everything else in life. Now, one of the problems that we face is that in trying to understand the physiology and mechanics of balance, somehow our logical understanding of what we're all perfectly capable of doing gets shaken down to the very foundation. Physiological concepts of muscle memory and balance get tossed out the window and replaced by visions of doom and gloom. And the childhood appreciation that an unsupported wheel can roll without falling for as long as it's kept in motion, and the faster it rolls, the more stable it is, that gets forgotten. It's as if age, along with accumulated knowledge, wisdom, and experience and bias, has a strange and very subtle way of distorting logic and squashing spontaneity, innovation, and excitement. Indeed, if we only started walking upright when we were well into our 30s, we'd probably have 97.5% of the human species down on all fours, with the remaining 2.5% institutionalized for their own good. I can just imagine what our experts would have had to say about the standing minority. Probably something like, these idiots will topple to their doom each time there's a gust of wind, and the worst part is that they'll take out a few of us on their way down. Or, stupidity is an inevitable consequence of the upright stance because the heart has difficulty pumping enough blood against gravity to nourish the brain. Or perhaps gravity-dependent pooling of fluids in the groin causes reproductive dysfunction, and this could mean the end of mankind. So it's the utmost importance that these people are stopped. The world on all fours would make a very good sci-fi comedy in which two-legged aliens would just laugh at us and then leave. But I'm sure they wouldn't leave without giving us something to help us with our evolution and lay the foundation for our future mantra. 2 wheels good, 1 wheel better. Now that we're good to go, unicycling demands continuous effort, concentration, and 360-degree situational awareness. To the mathematicians, physicists, and engineers who are present, unicycling is an example of a non-holonomic system. This is a system that you experts define as a physical system in motion, whose state depends on the path taken in order to achieve it. Now, with unicycling, the final path of the unicycle and rider depends on the intermediate values of their individual and collective trajectories through 3 dimensions. This is X, Y, and Z, 3 dimensions of space, that is, the 4th dimension of time, and the 5th dimension of time-space, which is essentially the rider's vivid imagination trying to make sense of the dynamic flux of the 4 dimensions of space and time. Well, to put it another way for us, the people, your weight, your shape, your posture, your movements, your speed, the surface texture of the ground, its consistency, the gradient, along with the wheel size and tire design and insufflation pressure and rolling resistance and the pedal power that you put in, and how all of these things come together at a single moment in space and time while you either relax or you panic. That is what will determine what happens to you and the unicycle at that very moment. And from moment to moment, instant to instant, inch to inch, you will perpetually adjust and either focus and fly or fidget and fall. So learning how to unicycle is achieved through study, training, rest, and repetition. That's a tactic that applies to every other facet of learning, no matter how complex the subject or the task is. And having absorbed enough science, my aim was to apply the newfound knowledge on the physics of balance to achieve the correct body posture and weight distribution on the unicycle, and to find my balance point. Now, most sources will recommend that you lean forwards a little to offset your center of gravity and then keep on pedaling to catch up with your center of gravity so that you do not fall. So I set myself a daily limit of about 30 minutes and deliberately stopped so that bad habits did not become entrenched, and skipped a day or two every now and then. And that's an often overlooked fact, is that it is during the rest periods when you are not training that the body makes the adaptive changes by enhancing existing neural pathways, reactivating dormant ones, and developing new ones. The progress from 0 to riding takes an average of about 10 hours. But for some individuals, the learning can happen within the hour. And that could very, very easily be one of you. Well, days went by and nothing had changed. Then on the 37th day, my wife stepped out of the house and saw me battling. And she said, "Your big tummy is so far in front. That's why you keep on falling." And she turned and went back indoors. And true, I hadn't factored in that important aspect of my body shape. So I did. And I added a counterweight as a backpack and sat bolt upright and then rode 10 meters. And in my excitement, I ran to find her and said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you, mwah." And ever since then, I have never been allowed to forget it. And somehow it just pops up every now and then when I don't want to listen to advice on something new. On my adventure, I looked for ideal learning places, one of which was the basement of the Parkview Shopping Centre in Pretoria. It had good lighting and the floor was smooth and obstacle-free. There were no spectators. Well, would you linger around and watch a 6'2" me in a lonely car park? Now, even the security guards weren't bothered about me. But it's not because they weren't good at their job. If you think about it, have you ever heard of a thief on a unicycle, let alone a bad guy? But when the guards did look at me, it was with a very fearful, "This is a wizard" kind of look. Another nice place was the sports complex at the Sefako Makato University north of Pretoria. I wasn't sure if I'd be allowed to ride on the clean, polished floor, so I asked the sports director for permission, and he listened very carefully and then used exactly 6 words, to ask me 3 questions and to grant me permission. And here's how it went. He said, "This thing." I said, "Yes." "One wheel." I said, "Yes." "You." I said, "Yes." "Okay." Now, even the security guards at the complex were very friendly. And they were very friendly and curious, and one of them came up to me after watching me fail like 1,000,000 times and then asked, "Why are you doing this?" He even had some words of advice for me, and I shall quote him word for word. He said, "Prof, let me tell you something. This thing is not for you. It's for the Chinese. And another thing," and he looked me up and down, "you must be thin. And you, no man. And also, you're going to have a problem with this." And trust me, who in the university didn't know that there was something not quite right with the acting head of the ENT department? Now, supporters and detractors are plentiful amongst family, friends, workers, neighbors, and onlookers. And Facebook friends. Oh, my Facebook page lit up with the guys taunting me, waiting for me to die and goading me on to make my death spectacular. And on the other hand, most of the ladies were out there urging me to take care. My 2 daughters were something else. They were in a league of their own. One of them was my diehard supporter, ride or die. And the other was mean and said, "Daddy, if you ride past me when I'm with my friends and they ask, 'Isn't that your dad?' I'll say, 'I have never seen that man before in my life.'" But years later, after a grueling academic and work experience, she became a chartered accountant and used my unicycle experience as part of her motivational graduation speech about how important it is to get up and try each time you fall. My diehard supporter, the baby of the house, bounced from job to job, and when I expressed some concern, she reminded me that she was getting up each time, and now she's a lecturer and a doctoral candidate. As for my dear wife, she had just one question for me. "So what's next?" Of the many things that I have come across in life, unicycling is the one activity for which, without putting in the time and the effort into learning, there's no free ride, even if your life depended on it. Look at everything else. With boxing and other forms of martial arts, if you're in enough trouble to warrant a fight, you might be able to wing it and get in a few shots. So try and get them in nice and early. Take swimming, for example. If you lie on your back and actually stop trying to swim, you will swim. Then there's football, rugby, golf, tennis, and even when riding a bicycle, you can scoot along with your feet on the ground instead of on the pedals. So, to those crooks who swiped my bicycles, and the young cyclist who inspired me, whoever you are and wherever you may be, I can't thank you enough for being those signposts at the start of this mental, physical, and social challenge. And to each of you, first, get the notion of difficulty out of your head, because that's the only real barrier to learning and success. Then take one thing home from this talk. That is, the only way to learn how to ride a unicycle is to get on the unicycle and pedal. And just like everything else in life that really matters, it won't come easy to you if you don't try. If you fall, get up. If you fall again, get up again. And with practice, patience, and perseverance, in the end, you will succeed.